Thank you again for coming, everybody, to our 2023 Gearing Up for Grandmas event that we put on each year with the support of one of our major sponsors, Essentia Health. Everybody's kind of getting settled with their drinks and their food, but we're going to start with the first of three speakers that we have for you tonight. The purpose of this event is, as you might know if you're here, to reach a lot of first-time marathoners as well as some of you veterans, talk about ways that you can be preparing for race weekend in June, the best ways that you can train and keep your body and your minds healthy so that you can have the very best race possible in June. So we've got a lineup of people that are going to talk about that from various different perspectives, try to give you the very best information so that you can have a good training season and that we can see you at the finish line in June. So we're going to start with an athletic trainer from Essentia Health, who is also our medical liaison. So she works in our office throughout the year, helps coordinate our medical volunteers for race weekend, and this is a newer position. She's trying to help us do exactly what we're doing here tonight, is get this information out to the runners so that you guys can train as best you can and have good races in June. So Christina Nisler is here with us from Essentia Health.
So like Zach said, I serve as Essentia Health's liaison to Grandma's Marathon. Essentia Health is a really proud sponsor of Grandma's Marathon. In addition to sponsoring the marathon, they donate over $750,000 worth of medical assistance to regional high schools, colleges, and athletic events. So in addition to working with grandmas, I'm also the high school athletic trainer for Barnum High School. And a couple weeks ago, one of the girls there referred to me as their sports nurse, which I thought was cute, and also kind of a better description of what it is that I do for them than trainer. A lot of times when people hear athletic trainer, they think of personal trainer. And what we do is actually very different. Athletic trainers are educated in prevention, treatment, rehabilitation of athletic injuries, and medical issues that are common in active populations. If you guys have been following the news for the last couple weeks and heard about what happened with the Buffalo Bills football player, athletic trainers were the first responders that saved his life on that sideline. And you'll see us at football sidelines running out there with our fanny packs. In addition to having been an athletic trainer for 14 years, I've been running for more years than you would believe. I have finished, I think now, 8 marathons. I think Saturday was my 8th half marathon and countless shorter races. I really love distance running and believe in the life-changing power of long distance races. So for that reason, I'm really excited for all of you that are going to be running Grandmas or the Gary Bjorklund half, and I really want to see your smiling face cross the finish line and not see you in the medical tent. So for that reason, I'm going to go over 4 pearls of healthy training that will help you prepare for the big day. Number 1 is getting a routine physical with your doctor. That's an easy tip to brush off. I know a lot of us think like, I go to my doctor, I'm healthy, I know what's up. But if you think back to when you were in high school, if you were involved in sports, every single year you would have to get a physical and show proof of it, and that's no less important now. Especially if you've had COVID-19 since your last physical. I would recommend going to your doctor, letting them know of your plans to run a marathon. Ask if there's any diagnostic testing that you might benefit from, such as an EKG, which can show your heart rhythm activity and let you know if there are any rhythms of concern. It's extremely rare for there to be a catastrophic event in a marathon. We'll get the scary talk out of the way and then get to the fun stuff. Extremely rare. About 1 million people will run a marathon this year, and the catastrophic event rate is only 1 in 150,000. So chances are slim, but go ahead and dot that I and cross that T so it's not you. Let's move on to the fun things. Trick number 2, this is an appropriate time of year to be looking for a training plan. Training really starts in like mid-February, but now's a good time to start looking for that plan that's appropriate for your current fitness level. Find one that starts out looking like something you can do. If you are a first-timer, looking at those later in the season long runs like 20 miles can sound a little intimidating, but the first few weeks should look like something that you can handle at this time. Additionally, making sure that it's a plan that can fit into your schedule, that the number of days that it asks you to run is something achievable. Now, taking on a marathon training plan or a half marathon training plan is a lifestyle change. There are some things that are going to have to change for the next few months. Going out to happy hour every Friday night will probably not set you up for a successful Saturday morning long run. This leads really well into tip number 3, which is now's a good time to start building your base of endurance. If you are new to running, adding a few runs into your week is important right now. If you're more experienced, you probably already have a great base level of fitness built up, but make sure you're running about 25 to 30 miles a week when that start of the training plan rolls around. I also can't stress enough how important right now it is to be cross-training. Doing other types of cardiovascular activity that don't impact your body in the same way as running, but lend to your running fitness. So swimming, cycling, elliptical trainer, and strength training is of the utmost importance. Building muscle in your lower body will help with shock absorption so that you're less likely to get an overuse injury, and it can help ward off some of those other injuries like IT band pain by strengthening muscles that might lead to those issues. And the last thing I wanted to mention, which is a little more down the road, is that if you're from this area, the bulk of your training is going to be done in our beautiful winter weather, or you may be doing a lot of your training indoors in a climate-controlled gym. The weather that we're going to have on race day, while usually pretty beautiful, is going to be a heck of a lot warmer than it is right now. So once that calendar page turns to June, be sure that you're starting to get outside. Be sure that you're running those last 2-3 weeks outside in the warmer weather so that on marathon day, your body's not shocked by the heat. We don't want to have to dunk you in ice water and monitor your internal temperature in a way that is not comfortable.
Christine is also going to be a regular member, a regular guest on our Gearing Up for Grandma's podcast, which we put out regular episodes leading up to the race, again, because of her involvement from Essentia Health in our office as that medical liaison. We get the chance to kind of pick her brain throughout the year. We just did kind of a mini 15-20-minute episode about winter running, specifically about how to layer, about how to practice some of those safety tips, those best practices for keeping your body healthy if you're trying to get those base miles in here during the colder months, because I assume that most everybody in this room is from around the area, so those outdoor miles are certainly hard to come by when the temperatures are this cold. So listen to that. We'll have timely information on the podcast as well as we get closer to race weekend. Good time to mention, actually, because Tortoise and Hare is coming up next. They're a local running store here in Duluth, one of our longtime partners. They're going to be giving away, along with the 5 entries, free entries to the 2023 Race of Your Choice that Essentia has put up tonight. Tortoise and Hare is going to be giving away 2 pairs of ice bugs, which Andy will tell you more about, I'm sure, but those are really nice shoes for winter running. And so you want to make sure that if you haven't already, you sign up, put your name and email address in our bucket here near the door. That's where we're going to draw our prize winners here after our speakers in just a little bit. So with that, Andy Stukel from Tortoise and Hare.
Hi everybody, I'm Andy Stukel, and my family has owned and operated Tortoise and Hare Footwear in Duluth for over 2 decades now. And if any of you are familiar or have been a part of a family business, this might be relatable to you, but I found out that I'd be doing this 10-minute speech in front of 100 plus people at about 9 a.m. this morning. So thanks, Mom. If I seem underprepared for this, that would be why, but we'll, we had 2 beers, so we'll make it work. A little bit about us and the business. We started off as a franchise of a different company that we were heavily involved in other athletic sports, basketball shoes, baseball cleats, football cleats, and the like. And eventually it just kind of evolved into more and more running, especially run products. And the reason for that really was because of the medical referrals we would start to get. We've always had a machine that would analyze people's arch types and gaits and pressure points, and because of that we were able to learn more and more about feet, and therefore more and more about shoes. And in that regard, we started to earn the trust of local podiatrists and chiropractors, physical therapists, athletic trainers, And our business transformed from going out to, Albrook High School to sell the football team cleats to having people come to us looking for specialty running products. So enough about us, but what we can do for you. Coming into Tortoise and Hare Footwear is going to be similar for just about everybody for the first time shopping for shoes. We still have a machine. It's gotten more advanced over the last 20 years to the point where it even has a name. He's Albert. So it's a little pad. It kind of looks like a spaceship, but you will first stand on, and we get a pressure mapping of your feet. We see where your highest degrees of pressure. We'll get an idea of what your arch looks like based on that as well. And then you will walk across it also. And that shows us how the pressure moves and how your arch changes and flexes as you take a step. It looks quite different actually as you have all your weight on one foot compared to standing evenly. And it will also do a full 3D mapping of your feet. All sorts of measurements for your length, your width, the height of your arch, the height of your instep, all down to the 100th of a centimeter. So we get a very, very specialized length, width, depth fitting of shoe and other aspects of footwear that you've probably never even thought of before. Now, once we get an analysis of your foot, we break our shoes down in a manner that will show you what might work best for you and why. We have three main categories of shoes. What we like to call motion control, support stability, and neutral or cushioning shoes. And largely they're based on what sort of arch type you would have. So generally speaking, there's going to be a lot of generalizations with this, but generally speaking, the lower your arches are, the more flexible they become. And every time you take that step and all your weight goes on the one foot, your arch is going to go from looking like this to falling down and inward or pronating. So what we do for a foot like that, that's very, very flexible, is try to structure the inner half of it and stabilize that excessive motion. So something like the Brooks Beast is going to have a straighter shape to the bottom of the shoe. It's going to have a hard plastic cup that kind of horseshoes your heel, so it guides you the second you land, as well as this one will have a denser piece of foam to the inner half of the arch and heel. So if that starts to fall in more than what it should be doing, you're kind of kicked back to the center. Now, each brand has different technologies, different cushioning systems, different support frames, but this is just Brooks's idea. Next, for the more moderate arch type, the big difference that we're going to see going from what we call a motion control shoe to a support or stability shoe is the frame or the shape of the product. Now, moderate arches will still, generally speaking, drop down and pronate, but to a much lesser degree than our lowest arch types. So something like the ASICS, is this the 2000? The ASICS 2000, which, by the way, ASICS is the big sponsor for Grandma's Marathon, is still going to have some degree of this denser foam to the inner half of the heel and arch, albeit slightly less, as well as the shape of the shoe. Gets a little bit sleeker, like under the arch, it will kind of contour in, match your foot just a little bit more specifically, hug the middle of your foot a little bit better, and really just drop weight because of that as well. Now, the highest arches are the least flexible. So that's like myself. I take a step and I don't drop. That arch really just holds its shape. It supports itself. So we get the shoes that are the most curved, or the shape kind of takes, it's hard to do it with one hand, but the shape really dips in right here. And that's because the highest arches aren't going to drop back inside, but will actually, that weight's going to stay on the outer half of your foot throughout your whole step, throughout your gait. So what the shape does is actually give more surface area to the outer half of your foot to just kind of land and do its own thing. We'll also have more specialized products. Oh, as I mentioned, there's different ways to give that support. Like the denser foam. Ultra has a shoe here with their guide rail system is actually something that the footbed is lower than the foam in this shoe. So it will go up over your feet and actually really just kind of lock you in. So this doesn't have any denser foam, even though it's more supportive. What it does is you're just literally sitting inside the midsole, inside the foam of the shoe. It's a very different feel. But also, there's different shapes, there's different dimensions that all of these products use that kind of differentiate themselves from each other. One, like Ultra, everything they make is called a zero drop shoe, which means your heels and your toes are at the exact same height. Most running shoes, the Brooks I showed you, the Asics I showed you, it's a 12 millimeter difference. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you try them both on and walk around the store, you're gonna notice pretty drastic different sensations for your heels and for your forefoot. And that's one of those things that you just don't know how it feels, and you don't know what you're gonna like until you try it on, until you walk, until you run in it. We get every single week, every single day, we get people who come in and say, my mom suggested the Brooks Adrenaline, it really worked well for her. My neighbor wears the Asics Nimbus or the Saucony Triumph, that works well for her. And the fact of the matter is that's about as useful as taking your grandma's glasses prescription to your optometrist appointment. We don't know what's going to work well for you until we put your foot inside of it. Now, yeah, we've got some specialty shoes for you. Those of you trying your first ever marathon or half marathon this year, you're going to learn about something called speed days, where you run a little bit shorter, but hopefully go slightly faster. I was not very successful with that in my first half marathon run, but we gave it a try anyway. And the idea with some of these like more specialized race day shoes is trying to drop weight without losing as much of the much of the cushion or support. So how would you lose the weight of the shoe? One, the heaviest part of the shoes for the most part is the rubber of the outsole. So compared to some of the other models I showed you, and we'll show them off over here too, but these are really thin, really flat on the bottom. They also drop the plastic heel cup, so you can get a lot of flex out of this shoe, again, just for the fact of dropping weight. Same with the Hoka Carbon. Dropped weight because we lose some of that rubber. Actually, it's blended in with the foam. Again, this is lighter than air. This is a carbon plated product, something that the first sub 2-hour marathon, that record was broken because of a carbon plate in a shoe. It really just, it doesn't flex much, and it really just kind of springboards you forward. So having multiple shoes in your training process, I don't know if that's feasible for everyone here, but it is something to consider, not only for the different types of runs you'll be going on, but actually the shoes and the foam that's used in all of these products, they do sometimes need recovery time. The foam is very responsive. It's going to sink in every time you take a step and push back up on you every time you take your foot back off. And the more steps you take, the less rebound you get. And if you give your shoe 24 hours to push back up fully, you're actually probably going to have a more comfortable ride, a comfortable run because of that. Sure. Now running this time of year is possible. We've got a few products that would make going outside on the ice a little less daunting. One of the things that we're giving out in the raffle is Ice Bug. Everything that they make has carbide tipped studs in the bottom. We have a cult following for these things at the store. People swear by these for their not only the running shoes, but their hiking boots and winter boots as well. If you already have a very comfortable pair of running shoes and you want to try and go outside and brave the ice, we have different styles of traction aids that will slip over several different sizes and styles of running shoes as well. And then accessories, things that you might not need, but can add just that little bit extra to your runs, to your training. Like for me, again, I have a super high arch, and there are shoes that are geared for high arched people, but that doesn't always cut it. They're always playing towards the middle. So for people with the lowest arches, people with the highest arches, not everything that the brands come out with for high arches and low arches are going to fit you perfectly either. So one thing that we can do to add onto the shoes is insoles. So this is something that I wore to get me through my half marathon, just because the middle of the arch comes up higher, contours with my foot better, and makes my runs more enjoyable. We've got 3 different brands of insoles and all sorts of different styles to try out to try to add on to your run. And another thing for me that I certainly wouldn't have gotten through my runs with this past year without is compression. I'm an old baseball player, catcher, umpire, and my knees are much older than the rest of my body. So we sell lots of this brand called OS First for all different joints, muscle groups. I wear the knee sleeves, things like plantar fasciitis, we have socks with compression. Shin splints, we have the calf sleeves with compression. People dealing with IT band or sciatic issues, we have a thigh sleeve for compression. We've got answers for lots of different ailments. We've got answers for different types of runs, different activities as well, different surfaces you're going to run on. Please just come by and ask us more questions. So.
Our next speaker, who I know everybody is super excited to hear from, I always am, even though I talk to him every marathon weekend. His stories are sometimes the same, but never get old. Dick Beardsley is a 2-time champion for us. He owned the course record for more than 3 decades before it was broken in 2014. He now comes back and is a very key part of our media team. He does the broadcast for the radio and the TV on the men's marathon. And Dick is one of those guys that every time you talk to him, it feels like you're ready to run a marathon. So I feel like slow down after you hear him talk. It's still just early January. The race is until June. But Dick is one of those guys that, well, Essentia Health and Tortoise and Hare will kind of get you ready from an apparel standpoint, physical standpoint. Dick is one of those guys that I would talk to get you ready from a mental standpoint. So join me in welcoming Dick Beardsley.
Oh man, thank you, Zach. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out on a night when the National College Football Championship is going on. Now that's dedication right there. How many of you, I ran my first Grandma's Marathon in 1981. Are there anybody out here that ran in 1981? Was there anybody born in 1981? So yeah, but listen, you know, I can't remember what I had for breakfast, you know, this morning, but I can remember those two Grandma's Marathons that I ran in 1981 and 1982. And you know, when you train really at whatever level, and I was fortunate to train at a very high level and compete against some of the best runners in the world at the time, you know, many years ago. And whether you're a first timer getting ready for your first half marathon coming up at Grandma's or the marathon, or have done many of them, you know, everything from a physical standpoint and a training standpoint, for the most part, you're all doing pretty much the same stuff. You know, I know when I was, you know, training back in my younger days, you know, most of us back then were running 130 to 140 miles a week. Please do not do that. You do not need to be running that many miles, but that's kind of what we did. I know for myself, I ran twice a day, 7 days a week. Even on my long run on a Sunday morning, I'd go out for an easy 3-mile shag in the afternoon on some kind of a soft surface, not to really add up for the miles, but really just to get my legs ready for the next morning when it was time to go out and start all over again. It just seemed to kind of refresh them a little bit. But so we were all doing pretty much the same stuff from a training standpoint. So then what makes the difference of, you know, running well or maybe not having such a good race? And then it comes down a lot to the mental part of it and how you look at it. And I know this for me, and I found this out fairly early in my marathoning career, that especially as I got a little faster and started competing at a higher level, is that every marathon that I ran, you know, once I got to that, not counting my first 2 when I ran them, I swore I'd never ever run another one again. But as I got into that where I was competing to try to win the race, I found out fairly early that it didn't matter the type of training I did, but at some point between 16 to 19 miles, I knew I was going to hit a bad spot. And that's a time of the race that, you start to feel it a little bit. But I knew that was going to happen, but I knew this. I knew that if I could stay focused, stay positive, that I would get out of that little slump or whatever you want to call it and start feeling better. So here's the choices I had at that point. When I would get to that point, let's say I'm up there in that lead group or with maybe you're running with a group of people, and all of a sudden you hit that spot where, man, I'm just not feeling really good. And the first thought is, oh boy, here it goes. I'm hitting the wall before I thought I was going to hit the wall, and that's something we can talk about later. But so my biggest challenge in at that point was if I started feeling bad between 16 to 19 miles, and I was in that lead group, and somebody in that lead group decided to make a hard surge, my two choices were either I just wait until I start feeling better, or do I go with it? And I probably 99% of the time, even if I was feeling bad, I would mentally push through that and go with the surging pack, because I didn't run real well from behind. I had to be more up in the front. So that mental part is such an important thing. And when you do hit that little tough spot of the marathon, again, if you can stay focused mentally, think about some of those hard workouts you got through on a crazy winter day when you're out there training, and use that to try to refocus yourself and just keep putting that one foot in front of the other. And what I always did, and I still do it to this day, every morning when I wake up, I've done this for as long as I can remember, I always start the day looking for something positive, something that's going to enhance my day. So when I was getting ready for my first Grandma's Marathon in 1881, I was living in an apartment down in Excelsior, training down in the Twin Cities area down there at the time. And my training had been going really, really well. And it was a Thursday morning, and I was driving up from the cities up to the Grandma's Marathon, and I was so excited. I mean, I'd heard so much about the Grandma's Marathon, and I was so excited. I wanted to come here, and Scott Keenan, the race director and founder of the race, invited me to come and run the race. And so, man, I was just really, really ready to go. And I remember I got done with my training that morning, my last, run for that day, and I packed my bags, and I threw them in the car. I grabbed the mail, I threw it over on the passenger side, and I started driving north to Duluth. Well, I'm excited, and I'm telling myself, man, Dick, you've done those 20-plus mile runs for how many to get ready for this? You've done up and down hill repeats, speed work, fartlek, you name it. You've done it, you're ready to go. But even the most positive people, sometimes that little negativity pops up on your shoulder. And I remember this little guy popped up on my shoulder and said, you know what, Dick? You ran too many 20-mile runs. You ran up and down those hills too many times. So I'm driving in the car, and all I can think about is the race. And it's just kind of driving me nuts. So I looked over on the passenger side, and I see this mail I had just thrown in the car from the post box, and I noticed that one of my running magazines, Track and Field News, had come. So I'm in the interstate now, heading north on 35, and I thought, well, heck, I'll just pick up the magazine and read it while I'm driving the car. If you would find my luck later in life, you probably would not ever want for me to have done that, but I did it. So anyhow, I grab that magazine and I flip it open. The page it turns to in big, bold, black letters, John Graham of England runs 2 hours, 9 minutes, 46 seconds at the Rotterdam Marathon. One of the top 5 times ever run in the world at the time. Thinking, holy cow, I'm reading this article as I'm driving and thinking, man, guy ran 2:09:45. And then I figured, well, if I want to get to Duluth safely, I better put the magazine down. So I'm driving along, trying not to think about the race, going north on 35. And the first mile marker that I recall seeing, the first one is somewhere between Willow River and Moose Lake, I think. It's mile marker number 209. Now, okay, I'm thinking to myself, hold on here. I flip open this magazine, this 209 pops out at me. First mile marker I see is mile marker 209. I'm thinking, am I gonna run a 209 marathon on Saturday? Now my best was about 2.5 months before that. I was fortunate to be the co-winner of the first London Marathon, and I ran 2:11:48. You think, well, 2:11, let's say 2:12 to 2:09 is only 3 minutes, but 3 minutes at that end of the scale is like night and day. So I thought, just don't even think about that. You're out of your mind. So anyhow, I finally pull into Duluth about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I've stayed at the Radisson Hotel every year, and I park my car and I walk in and have my bags and I set them down and I go, ma'am, do you have a room for Dick Beardsley? Oh yeah, you betcha, Mr. Beardsley. And she got me some information, a packet of goodies or something, and she handed me a key and she says, good luck on Saturday. And I said, yeah, thanks a lot. So I picked up my bags, put them on my shoulder. So I walk around that circular building there to the elevators on the inside, and luckily the doors were open and nobody else was getting on when I did. So I get onto the elevator, the door is shut, I drop my bags, I guess I better see what room I'm in. And I look at my key and I start hollering like a little kid that got a new train set for Christmas. What room do you think I had? Room 209. Not even close. But I had room 902. And in my goofy mind, backwards, that's 209. And the next morning, 2 days later, I didn't know if I was going to win the race, but I knew I was going to run a 209 marathon. Did I tell Scott Keenan? No. Did I tell anybody? No. It was just between me and the good Lord, but I knew I was going to run a 209 marathon. So on race morning, now I hope and pray that this coming June, that the 47th Grandma's Marathon is just like the day we had in 1981. Because it was about as perfect of a day for a marathon as you could possibly have. It was about 48 degrees at the start, pretty close to the same, if I remember right, at the finish line. No wind, and a little fog and mist rolling in off the big pond of Lake Superior. And there was a guy in the race named Gary Bjorklund. Have you ever heard of Gary Bjorklund? Please say yes. Good, because he's, in my opinion, probably the greatest distance runner to ever come out of the state of Minnesota. Well, BJ, his nickname, grew up in Twig, not too far out of town from here, and he was the defending champion. He ran 2:10:20 here at Grandma's in 1980, all by himself. He's in the race. So, gun goes off, bam, Gary takes off, and I take off with him. We get about a quarter mile down the road, and I look back, and I don't see anybody because the fog was so thick. And BJ turns to me, he says, Beards, listen, buddy, it's just you and me, but it's your race. He says, I'm going to do everything I can to help you get to the finish line as quick as you can. Of course, my first thought is, okay, he is setting me up for the kill. Honest to gosh, I'm thinking he's an Olympian, course record holder, defending champion. Yeah, it's my race. So anyhow, we're going along, running a little under 5 minute per mile pace, and just before a little after 4 miles, I got one of the worst things all of us runners never want, right there, the old stitch. I got this stitch, and I mean, it is hurting me. I'm kind of rubbing it without him hopefully seeing me rubbing my side, and it is getting bad. And I start to thinking what he told me about, he's going to help me along here. So I turn to him, I go, BJ, man, he goes, I got a terrible stitch. He goes, Beards, no problem, we'll back off the pace. He says at 5 miles, there's going to be an aid station, get a drink of water, and you'll be good to go. So we backed off the pace a little bit. 5 miles, I get a drink of water, sure enough, pace goes away. I'm thinking, man, this BJ's a pretty nice guy. So anyhow, you know how they measure a course, right? They measure the tangents. So anywhere you can kind of cut, you know, where the road kind of curves, that's the way they measure it. Well, I'm running straight down that yellow line on Old Highway 61, right down the middle. And I noticed when we get to a curve, BJ would cut the corner, and then if it cut back the other way, he'd be back on that middle line. And he finally comes up to me, as we're running side by side, he goes, "Beards," he goes, "what the heck are you doing running straight down that yellow line the entire route?" I go, "What the heck are you doing?" I go, "You're cheating, you're cutting the corners." And he looks at me and says, "You big cob of corn." He goes, "The way they measure these courses, the way I just described," he says, "start cutting the tangents like you're supposed to." So I thought, okay, I started cutting the tangents, and I'm thinking, man, the good Lord sent me this BJ down to help me in this race today. So we're moving along, and we come through the halfway. In an hour and 4 minutes and 38 seconds or something, he goes, "Beards," BJ turns to me and says, "Beards, you got a 2:09 going." I'm thinking, yeah, I almost started choking on my phlegm that I was spitting up at the time. I go, boy, wouldn't we all like to get to the halfway point in a marathon and just let's double our time. Of course, you can't do that. So anyhow, we're running along, feeling good. And just before, it was about 18 miles, I think it was, just before you come off the old highway and just before you cross the Leicester River, you get into town. Well, I had a terrible habit back then of looking behind me when I'm racing. And I knew there wasn't anybody close to us, but by gum, I had to look behind me. So I look behind me, take a few strides looking like this. I turn back, and BJ's about 30 yards in front of me, and he is flying. And I'm thinking, son of a gun, he is setting me up. He wanted to run together with me until we get to the city limits into town where the crowds get real big. BJ being from the Duluth area, man, they're going to be cheering for him. I'm thinking, man, I got to go after him. So I go after him, I catch him, but not till the 19-mile point. So now we're running side by side again, and I'm thinking, okay, I got to make this guy hurt. So I throw in this hard surge. I get to mile 20, and a volunteer on a bicycle comes up. He goes, "Beards, you just ran a 4:41 mile, but BJ's only 10 yards back." And I look back, and sure enough, I could still see the color of his eyes. So I thought, okay, I got to really make him hurt. So I throw in this next hard surge. I get to the 21-mile mark, and the guy on the bike comes up. He says, "Beards, you just ran a 4:36 mile, and BJ's hurting." I'm thinking, BJ's hurting? I think I'm going to have a heart attack at this point. Honest to gosh, I thought I had blown my race, and I looked back, and I could see BJ's head kind of hanging a little bit and his arms down. I thought, okay, he's hurting, but so am I. And so I backed off the pace a little bit, and so I'm going up Heartbreak Hill. I'm going up Lemon Drop Hill. Now it's still a pretty good hill, but it was a lot bigger hill, kind of a double bubble there, if you want to call it, back in 1981 before the interstate came through there. So I get up to the top, and we start going down that nice, long, gradual incline or decline down that hill there, and I look at my watch, and my little watch I was wearing was gone. The battery had worn out. So I had no idea where I was on the course. I had run the course before, and like nowadays, and they've done this for a number of years, they got them big old gosh dang air balloons that stick up every mile, and you can see them pretty near from 1 mile to the next. Back then, I always tease Scott about this, but back then they used empty coffee cans with a paint stick in it and a piece of paper stapled to it with a magic marker on it. It really isn't quite that bad, Scott, but it makes the story sound better. And so anyhow, I had no idea where I'm at. But I start coming down by about Fitgers there or something, and it was so foggy, you could not see to the next block ahead of you. And the dreaded stitch came back. And I mean, this time it was even worse. This time, no BJ to help me out. And then my thought was this, and this is something you can all use, that when you start hurting, know that you can go at least another mile. And I knew this. I knew if I could get to the Radisson Hotel, which was about the 25-mile mark, I knew no matter how bad I was hurting, I knew I could make it to the finish line and hold off anybody that might be coming up on me. But this stitch is bad. And I mean, I'm thinking the whole gosh darn group of runners behind me are going to come by me. I mean, it was that bad. So I just kept squinting my eyes, looking for that Radisson Hotel. Finally, I thought, am I seeing things? I think I see it through the fog. Each step I took, I could see it clearer and clearer. And finally now I could see the corner where we had to take that left turn at the Radisson. So I'm getting closer and closer, and I noticed as I'm getting closer, there's a little kid in the middle of the street playing with his little Tonka toy truck. I'm thinking, surely mom and dad are gonna get the little guy out of the way. So now I'm about 30, maybe 25, 30 yards from him. Now, even though I have a stitch, I'm moving along at a pretty darn good pace. I'm going, the kid, get the kid out of the way. Nothing happens. I'm down to like 20 yards. All of a sudden, that little boy, he picks up that little Tonka toy truck. He takes a turn and he starts going across the street with it. He gets about halfway across. I'm 10 yards from him. He stops and looks me right in the eyes and he freezes. And at this point, I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do here? Now, this is when downtown Duluth, they only had one side of the street closed down. The other side had cars. I'm thinking, okay, if I go to my right, I'm going to get run over by a car. If I go to the left, I'm going to run into that lamppost and the crowd on the corner, or do I take the kid out? At that point, my only option was to take the kid out. And I ran smack dab into that little guy. He went flying off into the crowd. I remember looking back and I hear him cry and I'm thinking, well, that's good. It means he's still breathing anyhow. But the best part of that whole deal is when I hit the little guy, it made my stitch go away. Honest to gosh, got my stride back. Now, I don't want you to do that on race day. If you get a stitch, you go looking to run into somebody. But my stitch went away. And when I came around that last turn, I remember the crowd going crazy. They're going, you're going to break 2:10. I'm thinking, are they crazy? Now remember, I had no idea how fast I was running. We didn't have a pace car in front of us or anything like that. And my first thought was, did Scott Keenan forget to start the clock? Because as I got closer and closer, I'm thinking, by golly, it's reading 2:09 something. And honestly, when I came across that finish line, I was jumping up and down like a little kid that just won $1 million. Honest to gosh, I had no idea. And my finishing time was 2 hours, 9 minutes, 36.6 seconds, so they have to round that up to 2:09:37. Now, do you think I would have run 2:09 that day if I hadn't seen those 2:09s a couple days before? Probably so, but here's what it did. Anytime you can do something to just make you relax, give you a little more confidence, it's amazing what that can do. But also, it's amazing whether you have a coach, train with a group, or train on your own. Now, back then I had a guy named Coach Bill Squires. He just passed away before his 90th birthday this past summer. And he was my coach. He was a wonderful person. I believe he wasn't he here at Grandma's, Scott? You've had him in a time or two. Just a wonderful guy. He lived in Boston. I live here in Minnesota. Of course, there was no internet back then. He would send me my workouts on the back of a beer-stained napkin from the local running bar hangouts he used to go to, and then call me once a week. But he sent me an envelope the week of the Grandma's Marathon with a little note in it, with another envelope inside that one. He says, Dickie, don't open this until after your Grandma's race. So I got back and I was all excited. I got up to the hotel room. First thing I did was open that envelope. And in it, Coach Squire says, Dickie, you're gonna run somewhere between 2 hours, 9 minutes, and 2 hours and 10 minutes. I mean, that's a guy coaching me from 3,000 miles away. Pretty amazing, that's for sure. So I got one other real quick story. And then so I come back in 1882 for the Grandma's Marathon. Scott wanted me to come back and defend, and I wanted to come back and defend. So anyhow, I had just run Boston 62 days before that race, and where Salazar ran 2:08:51 and I ran 2:08:53 that day. So just a couple seconds, and it was the first time 2 minutes ever broken 2 hours and 9 minutes in the same marathon. So everybody, when I got back home to Minnesota, everybody, the media, everybody's talking world record. Everybody except me. They go, oh, Grandma's Marathon, better course, faster course, blah, blah, blah. Everybody's talking about me gonna break the world record at Grandma's in 1982. And I was beat up after that race, but eventually I started feeling better and I started getting excited about the race. And when race director Scott called me up, this was probably, I don't know, a couple, 2-3 weeks before the race, he goes, Dick, here's the deal. And this is how I remember it. It might be different in Scottsdale. He goes, Dick, here's the deal. I'm bringing in the most sophisticated timing system there is in this country. A guy named Dr. Black from Florida. He said there's going to be 3 clocks on the pace vehicle. One with your running time, one with your projected winning time, and one with your pace per mile. And he says, I'm bringing in a guy named Dave Babaracki. Now, Dave Babaracki was a California kid at the time, and he was a U.S. record holder for 25K. And Scott says, Dick, I'm bringing him in, and he's going to take you out at world record pace for the first 15 miles, and then you're on your own. Well, at this point, what choice do I have? And I was never one that ran for records. I was more running to try to win, and if a fast time came, so be it. But at that point, I started mentally getting myself into it. Well, on race day, as great as the morning and perfect as it was the day before, or the year before, morning of '82 was a lot different. It was sunny, there was a headwind, and it was a lot warmer at the start. So anyhow, I'm on the starting line, gun goes off, Babaracki jumps out in the lead, and man, I tuck right in behind him. And he's busting the wind for me, and mile 2, 3, 4, and about 6 miles or so, I look at the clock, and the projected winning time is 2:06. Now this is when the world record was like 2:08, but I'm feeling pretty darn good. So we're going along here, one step after another, one step after another. He's bucking that wind, and I'm tucked in right behind him. Now remember, he's supposed to take me out for the first 15 miles so I can stay behind him. Well, at about 8 miles, Dave must have started getting a little tired or something, so he tucked in behind me. So now I'm breaking the wind, and at 9 miles, he pretty much bailed. He was done. So now here I am, out there all by myself, and I'm watching this clock, and every step I took, the projected winning time kept getting slower and slower and slower. Well, then about halfway, somehow a pebble gets on the inside of my shoe. And I'm a mid-foot, 4-foot runner, and that pebble worked down up to the ball of my foot, and every step I took, that pebble got more and more deeper into my foot, and I should have stopped and just taken the shoe off and got it out of there, but of course nobody wants to do that. Well, if you'd like, when we're all done here, there's some photos that Grandma's provided I can sign for you, and it's the one of showing me coming across the finish line in 1982 with my hands up like this. And you'll look at my face, I've got a smile on it, but it's not a smile of, man, I'm just won my second Grandma's. It was a smile that, my gosh, I am done and relieved that this is over with. And you'll have mixed emotions. How many of you are running your first first marathon in June? Any of you? Yeah, good for you. You know what? Less than 2% of the people in the world ever attempt to run a full marathon, and less than that even finish. So you're in some very, very high company there. And like I've said this for so many years, when you cross that finish line, it will change your life forever in a positive way. There will never, ever again be something in your life that you will think about wanting to do and say to yourself, no, I can't do that without at least trying. That's how powerful it is. And finishing up here, I just want to say one last thing. Grandma's Marathon is, I hope I don't get choked up about this. You know, I've been coming here every year since 1981. And I haven't run it. I think the last time I ran it was in like 2006. But I've come back every year, speak at the expo, and then do the play-by-play for the local radio station. But through the thick and thin, Grandma's Marathon has always been there for me and my family, starting with Scott and now with Shane and the folks here that run Grandma's now. And, you know, I went through a terrible farming accident back in the late 1980s, and they held a big benefit up here to raise money because I didn't have medical insurance. I became addicted to narcotic painkillers 27 years ago, and their number was concern for me was, what can we do to help you? I lost my son, Andy, who was a soldier in the United States Army, to PTSD 7 years ago from suicide. And again, Grandma's Marathon reached out, and what can we do to help you, Dick? And that's something I'll be forever grateful for till the day I die. And you could not pick a better run, a better race to be competing in, nor do it in a better city than the city of Duluth, and the way they come out and support this event. And many people over the years have asked me, Dick, what's your most memorable marathon? And almost everybody is surprised. They think I'm going to say it's that 1982 Boston Marathon where Salazar and I dueled it out. And that's right up there. But the one that stands out for me the most is that 1981 Grandma's Marathon here. And it wasn't because I won. It wasn't because I ran 2:09. Because it was the first time my mom and dad had ever seen me run a marathon. And Scott let my parents be on the inside of the finish line. So when I came across that finish line, jumping up and down, my dad, who you could hit over the head with a 2x4 and you wouldn't cry, my dad's crying, my mom's crying, I'm crying, we're all hugging each other. It's a day that I will never, ever forget. And my dad didn't have an opportunity to play sports. He only had an 8th grade education, and I was the only boy in our family. And my dad, for 3 months or better after the Grandma's Marathon in 81, if I was with my dad somewhere, he'd go up to people he didn't even know and say, do you know who this is? It's my kid. He set the record at Grandma's Marathon. Grandma's, I will be forever, ever grateful to Scott, to Shane, and all the people that have helped put this great event on over the years. So thank you for coming out, supporting this race, and I'll see you back here in June, and have a great winter of training. You got plenty of time to get ready, so don't push it too hard too soon. Thanks, everybody. Take care.